Nothing will take away the pain and the sorrow that we experience every day, and we will continue to experience for the rest of our lives.
At 7:11 a.m. on March 16, 2012, 15-year-old Sierra LaMar sent her last text message, a simple reply to a friend about homework and makeup. 14 minutes later, her school bus arrived at the corner of Palm and Doty Avenue in Morgan Hill, California, but Sierra never got on. What investigators found next would launch one of the largest search efforts in California history, over 50,000 hours, equivalent to 5.5 years of continuous searching. Yet 12 years later, Sierra has never been found.
What the DA has to deal with is the fact that there is no body in this case. There's no murder weapon or crime scene. So these small bits of forensic evidence is all that Sierra LaMar left behind.
Before we examine the evidence that helped solve this case without ever finding a body, including a single strand of hair that became the key breakthrough, remember that stories like Sierra's matter. Families like hers deserve for their loved ones to be remembered not as statistics, but as the vibrant, irreplaceable people they were. Sierra Mae LaMar was born on October 19, 1996, in Fremont, California. In this place, Sierra had built the perfect teenage life. She joined the cheerleading squad as a freshman, had this tight circle of friends who meant everything to her, and seemed genuinely happy. At that age, your friends are your whole world, and Sierra had found her people. She treasured those friendships deeply. You can see it in every photo from that time, the way they're always hugging, always together, always laughing. Which is why October 2011 changed everything for her. A judge ruled that Sierra had to live full-time with her mother, and her mother was planning to leave Fremont for Morgan Hill, 35 miles away. Now, 35 miles might not sound like much to adults, but when you're 15, when your entire social universe exists within a few square miles, it might as well be another planet. The reason for this court-ordered move is disturbing but important. Sierra's father, Steve, had been caught acting inappropriately with one or more of her friends during a sleepover. He was arrested and charged for his actions. Marlene divorced him immediately and wanted a fresh start away from the scandal and trauma. While Sierra's older sister was 19 and could choose where to live, 15-year-old Sierra had no choice. So, in October 2011, Sierra and her mother moved to Morgan Hill. It was only a 45-minute drive from her old life, but for a sophomore in high school, it meant starting over completely. Sierra tried to adapt. She joined the cheer team at her new school, started making some new friends, but anyone who knew her could tell she wasn't thrilled about Morgan Hill. She even told friends she was thinking about moving back somehow, though whether this was serious planning or just teenage venting, we'll never know. On top of that, Marlene had also started a new relationship with a man named Ricky, and they'd moved in together. And on the morning of March 16, 2012, everything seemed normal. Marlene walked into her daughter's bedroom around 6 a.m. to make sure she was awake for school. Sierra was up, about to get dressed. Marlene gave her $5 for lunch, told her she loved her, and left for work. She had no idea those would be the last words she'd ever say to her daughter. At 6:57 a.m., Marlene texted Sierra asking her to wipe down the tub before leaving for school. Then another text asking if she was meeting up with a friend after school. Sierra never responded to her mom, pretty typical for a teenager, but we know she saw the messages because at 7:11 a.m., she texted a friend about bringing the stuff to school. The stuff was just homework and makeup, normal teenage coordinating. That 7:11 a.m. text is crucial. It's the last confirmed contact Sierra had with anyone. It also proves she was planning to go to school. She wasn't running away. She was just trying to get through another Friday. Now, it's important to note that Sierra's bus stop was less than half a mile from her house at the intersection of Palm Avenue and Doty Avenue. The bus arrived every morning at 7:25 a.m. sharp. To catch it, she usually left home around 7:10 a.m. Investigators believe that's exactly what she did that morning. But when the school bus camera footage was reviewed later, it showed that Sierra never got on. This gave investigators a terrifyingly narrow window, just 14 minutes between her last text at 7:11 a.m. and the bus arrival at 7:25 a.m. Somewhere in those 14 minutes, on a quiet rural road with no cameras, no witnesses, Sierra LaMar vanished. When Marlene got off work at 3:45 p.m., she called Sierra like she always did, but there was no answer. She tried 7 more times over the next hour. By the time she got home and found the house empty, maternal instinct was screaming that something was wrong. She rushed to the high school and even called her ex-husband in Fremont, but no one had seen her. Then, at 6 p.m., an email from school confirmed her worst fear. Sierra had never made it to any of her classes. The 911 call came shortly after. Marlene begged for an Amber Alert, but investigators said Sierra didn't meet the qualifications, though they never explained exactly why. What's frustrating about these cases is how often we see Amber Alerts denied for reasons that seem arbitrary when a child is clearly missing. At first, like too many of these cases, police wondered if Sierra had run away. She'd mentioned to friends she wasn't happy in Morgan Hill, maybe wanted to move back to Fremont, but her parents knew better. And thankfully, the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office took it seriously from the start. They began canvassing the area immediately, but here's what made this search a nightmare from minute one. Morgan Hill sits in this strange pocket of California where suburban life butts right up against agricultural land. Picture this. You leave Sierra's house, walk 5 minutes, and suddenly you're surrounded by nothing but strawberry fields stretching to the horizon. Apple orchards that go on for miles. Walnut groves so dense you can't see 10 feet into them. Detective Jeff Smith would later describe it as looking for a needle in 1,000 haystacks, except we didn't even know which haystack to start with. The intersection where Sierra caught her bus, Palm Avenue and Dottie, was particularly isolated. On one corner, an abandoned barn that hadn't been used in years. On another, a drainage ditch running alongside an orchard. No gas stations, no convenience stores, not even a house with a Ring doorbell. The nearest business was a fruit stand 3/4 of a mile away, and it didn't open until 9 a.m. Then, less than 24 hours after Sierra vanished, something strange happened with her phone. The deputy who'd responded to the missing person report had tried calling it repeatedly that first night, straight to voicemail every time. But at 3:48 a.m. on March 17th, it suddenly stopped going straight to voicemail. The phone was on. When investigators tracked the signal, they found the phone turning on and off repeatedly, just for seconds at a time. Turns out, Sierra's Samsung Galaxy had been lying on wet ground only a few blocks from her bus stop. Water had seeped into the battery, creating false charges that powered it on momentarily, just long enough to ping the tower before dying again. The phone had been there the entire time, discarded almost immediately after she was taken. 2 days later, on March 18th, search teams found something even more disturbing. In a field about 2 miles from where Sierra disappeared, wedged between some cacti, was her juicy couture bag. Inside, neatly folded, were the clothes she'd been wearing that morning. The black San Jose Sharks sweatshirt from her final selfie, her jeans, underwear, bra, socks, shoes, and some school papers. The jeans smelled of urine. Investigators recognized this as a common physiological response to extreme terror. When someone faces a life-threatening situation, the body's fight-or-flight response can cause involuntary loss of bladder control. It told them Sierra had been absolutely terrified, but those clothes would become the key to everything. When forensics processed Sierra's clothing, they found 3 crucial pieces of evidence. First, microscopic algae called lichen that only grows in specific environments, potentially helping narrow down where she'd been taken. Second, tiny reflective beads embedded in her jeans, the kind used in road lane markings, suggesting she'd been dragged. But the third discovery was the breakthrough: foreign DNA on her jeans, specifically semen that didn't belong to Sierra. On March 28, 2012, they ran it through CODIS, 12 potential matches came back, but a CODIS administrator quickly eliminated 11. The DNA belonged to one person, 21-year-old Antolin Garcia Torres. Investigators kept this information secret from the public. They didn't want to spook him, especially if there was any chance Sierra was still alive somewhere. Instead, they put him under 24-hour surveillance starting March 28th. They wiretapped his phone, put a tracker on his car, even had 2 undercover officers move into a trailer next to his in the RV park where he lived with his girlfriend and their child. For 6 days, they watched his every move, hoping he'd lead them to Sierra. He never did, but the surveillance revealed something else that turned the entire timeline on its head. The RV park where Garcia Torres lived had exactly 1 security camera, an ancient analog system that recorded the single entrance and exit. When investigators first reviewed the footage from March 16th, they logged Garcia Torres's red Volkswagen Jetta leaving at 8 a.m., well after Sierra would have been taken. It looked like an alibi. Until Detective Sarah Chen noticed something odd about the timestamp. The shadows were wrong, she later explained. 8 a.m. in March should have longer shadows, different angles. These looked like 7 a.m. shadows. That's when they realized the camera's internal clock hadn't been adjusted for daylight saving time, which had happened just 5 days before Sierra disappeared. The timestamp reading 8 a.m. was actually 7 a.m. real time. This wasn't just an hour's difference. This was everything. Garcia Torres had actually left his home at 7 a.m., 10 minutes before Sierra sent her last text. The RV park sat at the intersection of Monterey and Watsonville Road, exactly 10.3 miles from Sierra's bus stop. At that time of morning, with no traffic on rural roads, it was a 10 to 12-minute drive. The math was devastating. Leaves home at 7, arrives near Palm Avenue by 7:10. Sierra sends her last text at 7:11. The bus arrives at 7:25 to find her gone. The camera also showed his return, 12:58 p.m., almost 6 hours later. 6 hours unaccounted for. When investigators mapped out how long it would take to drive to his supposed fishing spot at Uvas Reservoir and back, even with several hours of fishing, he should have been home by 10:30 a.m. at the latest. So where was he for those extra hours? On April 4th, detectives casually approached him. Their conversation was brief but telling. When asked if he knew about the missing girl in the area, Garcia Torres responded, "I would like you to get to the point." When asked if he knew Sierra, he said, "I doubt it. Why?" Perfect response for investigators. If he didn't know her, there was no innocent explanation for his DNA on her clothing. On April 7th, they brought him in for questioning. This is where Garcia Torres made a series of catastrophically stupid statements. He said he'd left home around 7:10 or 7:20 a.m. to go fishing alone at a reservoir. He admitted he'd missed his turn and taken Palm Avenue instead, the exact road where Sierra's bus stop was located. Then the detective asked if there was any reason his DNA would be on Sierra's belongings. The detective said DNA, nothing about what type. Garcia Torres immediately asked, could sperm be a source of DNA? Then he launched into this bizarre story about how he masturbates in his car while driving, cleans up with tissues, and throws them out the window. So if any sperm was found on her belongings, it must have been from a tissue that flew out his window and somehow landed on her clothes. The detective hadn't mentioned sperm, or semen, or any bodily fluids, just DNA. And while investigating Garcia Torres, detectives made a discovery that shifted this from a single tragedy to a pattern of predatory behavior. They pulled his employment records and found he'd worked at a Safeway distribution center in 2009. That same year, 3 women had been attacked in that exact Safeway's parking lot, cases that had gone cold. The attacks had happened within a 2-month span. The first victim, a 26-year-old woman leaving her night shift, was approached from behind and hit with a stun gun. She managed to scream and the attacker fled. The second woman, attacked 3 weeks later, wasn't as lucky. She was tasered, dragged toward the dark edge of the parking lot before her car alarm scared him off. The third woman fought back hard enough that the attacker dropped his stun gun and ran. At the time, investigators had created a composite sketch from the victims' descriptions: Hispanic male, early 20s, thin mustache, approximately 5 feet 8. They'd also recovered that dropped stun gun, bagged it, tested it for prints. A partial print on the battery was too smudged to match anyone in the system back in 2009. But technology had improved by 2012. When Detective Lisa Park pulled the old evidence box and looked at that composite sketch, she immediately saw the resemblance to Garcia Torres. The partial fingerprint that was useless 3 years earlier? New enhancement techniques made it readable. It matched Antolin Garcia Torres. Suddenly, investigators weren't looking at an isolated incident. They were looking at someone who'd been hunting women for years. The search warrant for Garcia Torres's car revealed the final pieces: Sierra's DNA on the driver's side rear door, her hair tangled in rope found in his trunk, fibers from his floor mats matching fibers on her sweatshirt. On May 21st, 2012, Antolin Garcia Torres was arrested for kidnapping and first-degree murder. His only response to being handcuffed was, "Really?"
A break. An arrest goes down in the search for 15-year-old Sierra LaMar. Take a look at this girl. We had hoped for a break in the case, and it came after we learned police were trying to find a red VW Jetta. And now an arrest, a 21-year-old man in custody linked to the kidnapping and murder of the missing 15-year-old girl. It's all based on DNA found in her bag, that little Juicy Couture bag.
The trial didn't begin until January 30th, 2017. For 5 years, Garcia Torres sat in jail maintaining his innocence while volunteer search teams never stopped looking for Sierra. Her family held vigils, balloon releases, searches every weekend. The community of Morgan Hill never gave up. The defense tried to argue Sierra had run away. They produced a notebook with writing that said, "I hate my life," and mentioned being in San Francisco on March 16th, 2012, the exact day she disappeared. But a handwriting expert testified none of it was Sierra's writing. The prosecution argued other students had written it as some kind of sick prank. The evidence was overwhelming. Garcia Torres's DNA on her clothes, her DNA in his car, his admission to being on Palm Avenue that morning, the surveillance footage showing his movements, his bizarre explanation about throwing semen-covered tissues out his car window. On May 9th, 2017, the jury found Antolin Garcia Torres guilty of kidnapping and murdering Sierra LaMar. They spared him the death penalty, sentencing him instead to life without parole. Sierra's father disagreed with sparing his life. Her mother, Marlene, said while she was grateful for the conviction, nothing would take away the pain and sorrow they experience every single day.
Well, nothing will take away the pain and the sorrow that we experience every day, and we will continue to experience for the rest of our lives. But truly, we've been praying for the chapter to have this type of ending, justice, and believing in it, knowing that God is there for us every day. And amen. We just believe in that, and we're grateful to the jurors coming up with the right decision. And it gives us peace as a family knowing that this is not going to happen to another child and that they can't get away with something like this.
In December 2020, a reporter received the first and only statement from Garcia Torres since his arrest. He maintains his innocence. He refuses to say where Sierra is. Think about that cruelty. This man knows exactly where a 15-year-old girl's remains are. He knows her family has spent 12 years searching, spending weekends combing through fields and diving in reservoirs. He knows her mother has never been able to bury her daughter, and he stays silent out of pure spite. By the numbers, Here's what his silence has cost: 50,000 hours of searching. That equals 5.5 years of continuous round-the-clock searching. Over $3 million in resource costs between professional search teams, helicopter flights, dive operations, and cadaver dog units. The Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office has conducted over 200 separate search operations. Volunteer teams have searched more than 3,000 acres of land, some areas multiple times as seasons change and landscapes shift. What's remarkable is how Morgan Hill has never forgotten her. In a world where missing persons cases fade from memory after the headlines die down, Sierra's community has spent over a decade actively searching. That kind of sustained community dedication is rare and beautiful, though it shouldn't be. Every missing person deserves this level of commitment. Going back to the investigations, detectives believe this was a random attack. Wrong place at the wrong time. A predator saw an opportunity on a quiet rural road and took it. But was Sierra his first murder? The Safeway attacks suggest he'd been building towards something like this for years. More haunting is what we don't know. Those 6 hours Garcia Torres was unaccounted for. Where did he go? Where is Sierra? The lichen on her clothes suggests certain environments. The water stains on his jeans at the bank suggest he was near water. But every reservoir, every pond, every body of water has been searched repeatedly. Will we ever know? Only if Garcia Torres decides to show a shred of humanity he's never demonstrated before. Sierra LaMar would be 28 now. She should be building a career, maybe married, possibly with kids of her own. She loved making people laugh. She was navigating the difficult transition of moving to a new school with Grace, even though she missed her old life. She was a normal teenager dealing with normal teenage things until a predator decided she didn't deserve to live her life. Her family created the Sierra LaMar Search Center, which has helped search for other missing persons in California. Her case has been used to train search and rescue teams. The sustained community response has become a model for how communities can maintain long-term search efforts. But none of that brings Sierra back. None of it gives her family the closure of a burial, a grave to visit, a place to leave flowers on her birthday. Now, something like this isn't new in the world of true crime. A similarly chilling case happened under almost the same circumstances, and it also took years before the truth finally came out. This was the case of Haley Dunn.
I really need to file a report on somebody.
What exactly happened?
I broke up with this guy a couple of days ago, and he's telling me that he's going to kill me and that it's going to be remembered for a long time.
He said he doesn't care if it takes 20 years to do this. And I do care if it takes 20 years. I don't want the person that hurt my kid that doesn't need to walk the street for 20 years.
On December 27, 2010, 13-year-old Haley Dunn was said to be heading to a sleepover at her best friend's house. But she never showed up, because she never even told anyone she was coming. If you follow true crime, chances are you've already heard of this case, because it became a high-profile investigation handled not just by local police, but also the Texas Rangers and even the FBI. And yet, despite a named suspect, it would drag on for 13 years before going cold all over again. Now, new details are surfacing. Pieces of evidence once hidden in sealed files or overlooked in the early investigation. But before we uncover those revelations, let's go back to where it all began. It was the morning after Christmas in Colorado City, Texas, a tight-knit town with just under 4,000 people and the kind of neighborhood where everybody knows your name. Haley Dunn, barely a teenager, had spent Christmas Day grinning ear to ear, showing off her brand new iPod and spending quality time with her dad, Clint. She was full of energy, a little tomboy who loved glitter and pretty things, played 3 different sports, and drop-ins at her father's house just across the street. And just to give you a little background on the family, Haley was the daughter of Billie Jean Dunn and Clint Dunn. Although her parents had separated years earlier, Haley was now living with her older brother David, her mother Billie, and her mother's boyfriend, Sean Adkins. From the outside, they might have looked like an ordinary, peaceful household. But on the morning of December 27, 2010, everything changed. Her mother, Billie Jean Dunn, said goodbye before heading to a 12-hour shift, leaving her daughter sound asleep in her bed. Her boyfriend, Sean Adkins, claimed he left for work even earlier at 5:30 a.m., only to quit minutes after arriving. He told investigators that he drove to his mother's house in Big Spring and stayed there for most of the day, but phone records would later suggest otherwise. By 2:30 that afternoon, a cryptic text was sent from Haley's phone to one of her friends. It said only one thing: "White in short for what you're doing." But this friend never replied, and no one ever saw Haley alive again. That night, when Billie got home and realized Haley wasn't there, she didn't panic, at least not at first. She asked Sean where her daughter had gone, and he casually said Haley had walked to her dad's and was spending the night with a friend named Mary Beth. But that didn't add up. Clint Dunn, the biological father of Haley, who lived right across the street, hadn't seen his daughter all day.
That was my day, and then I came home around, I guess, like 3 o'clock. I got there, and Haley was there watching TV in the living room, and I went to me and Billie's bedroom, and she came in there and told me that she was going to her father's house and that she was staying the night with a friend, and then she left. And then I was there by myself for maybe an hour at the most, and then David and a friend came over, and they went to his room, and they were playing video games and so forth. And Billie called me and told me that that her relief got there and that she's going to get to leave a little early. So I was up there at the hospital in Snyder around 6 o'clock to pick her up, and then we came back. And then we went to bed shortly after that.
And this whole time you were thinking Haley was at a friend's house?
Yes.
About what time did she say she was leaving at?
What time Haley was leaving? I guess it was sometime in between 3 and 3:30 when she said she was leaving. It was like shortly after I got there. I'm not real sure about a time.
Does she normally call and check in every so often, or is it normal to not hear from her for so long?
It's pretty normal for her just to not call, because she usually does that, though, because she does stay the night at a friend's house. She'll be back the next morning.
And when Billie finally called Mary Beth's family, they were clear. Haley had never planned to stay with them. She never even said she was coming. What's even more troubling is what was left behind. Her cell phone, her purse, her favorite items, the things she took with her even on the most basic sleepovers, were still sitting in her room. And according to Billie, Haley was just gone. She even started going door to door, asking neighbors if they'd seen her daughter walking, wondering aloud if someone had snatched her off the street. But no one had seen anything. The next day, Billie finally filed a missing person report. Initially, authorities labeled Haley as a runaway, an assumption that would come back to haunt the investigation. The community, however, refused to stand still. Neighbors, friends, and strangers searched vacant lots, empty fields, and alleyways. Clint led the charge, rifling through dumpsters, walking until his feet gave out, chasing rumors even when they went nowhere. Meanwhile, Billie and Sean's behavior quickly raised eyebrows. Sean never joined the searches, never handed out flyers. He mostly answered questions and sat for interviews. Billie, for her part, admitted she couldn't bring herself to search the wooded areas, explaining that doing so felt like looking for her daughter's body. Instead, she clung to the hope that Haley would simply walk back through the door. But just 4 days after Haley disappeared, Billie and Sean hosted a New Year's Eve party. And for Clint, Haley's father, that just didn't sit right. By January 4th, the investigation finally escalated. The Texas Rangers and the FBI officially joined the search for Haley Dunn, bringing with them national attention and resources that Colorado City had never seen before. Billboards with Haley's bright, smiling face popped up across Texas highways, each one pleading for the public's help. But what truly launched the case into the national spotlight was a high-profile appearance by Billie Jean Dunn on The Nancy Grace Show.
Haley Dunn was extensive. Of course, the Texas Rangers started with Haley's home, the home she shared with her mother, Billy Dunn, and the live-in boyfriend, Sean Atkins. The intensive search did not end.
The interview was raw, uncomfortable, and quickly went viral, not just because of Billy's demeanor, but because Nancy didn't hold back. She grilled Billy, questioned her timeline, and cast serious doubt on Sean Atkins, whose name was already circulating as a possible suspect. In the days that followed, Sean gave his own interview, addressing the growing number of people pointing fingers at him. He said it hurt to be accused, especially when he claimed to love Haley with all his heart. But to many, his answers raised more questions than they resolved.
Haley's case was on national television, and Nancy Grace seemed to be a little hard on you. What was that like, hearing her question Billy like that?
I heard about it. I wasn't there when Billy was getting interviewed by her. I was talking to the Texas Rangers, but I heard about it, and it's frustrating, what she said about me, but it really doesn't bother me because, my main focus is just Haley, because we just want her to come home safe.
Does it hurt to think people would point fingers at you, the person who cares about her?
Yeah, it hurts. It does.
Describe to me the relationship between you and Haley.
It's a really good relationship, and I love her with all my heart, and I believe she loves me with all her heart, and we get along just fine.
See, is there anything else you want people to know about you and your relationship with the family at all? Because it seems like a lot of people are buzzing on the internet about it.
Yeah, as far as me, Haley, and Billy and David, we all get along just fine. And I would never do nothing to that little girl. I love her with all my heart. And I just wish for her a safe return.
Meanwhile, Clint Dunn was relentless. While national attention swirled around talk show drama, Clint was on the ground, searching, calling, begging. He reached out to media outlets, detectives, and even private investigators, urging them not to let his daughter's case go cold. He refused to accept the silence that followed each tip. Deep down, he believed both Billy and Sean knew more than they were saying. Behind closed doors, the family dynamic began to fracture under pressure. What seemed like a quiet home on Chestnut Street began to look more like a powder keg. Police records revealed a history of domestic disputes between Billy and Sean, including at least one disturbing incident months before Haley went missing. In that call, both parties accused the other of threats, and officers described the couple as argumentative and unstable.
I really need to file a report on somebody.
What exactly happened?
I broke up with this guy a couple of days ago, and he's telling me that he's going to kill me and that it's going to be remembered for a long time.
I got a situation on my hands. I have an ex-girlfriend. She's taking a whole bunch of anxiety pills that I take. So I guess she got them from me, and she said she took a bunch of her pain pills too. And she's saying that she wants to die, so she filed a report on me, for threats and stuff like that. So she's just upset about it. She's just, not being herself right now. Threatening to kill her.
Damn it.
It's Billy Dunn.
Oh, God. He's been going all day. All right, I'll go up there.
This wasn't exactly news to the neighbors. They had heard the shouting through the walls, whispered about the tension, and watched from a distance as arguments spilled into the yard. Some described the house not as a home, but as chaotic and unsettling. But what truly rattled the community were the words that came from Haley herself.
Things that Haley used to tell me about the man.
What kind of things?
She didn't like him. She didn't trust him. She was afraid of him.
I don't want to be here right now. I'm going to be here with you because I don't feel right with my stepdad.
As you've heard, she had confided in friends and family that she didn't feel safe at home, that she didn't trust Sean. Her grandmother Connie recalled Haley telling her she would sometimes see Sean's shadow outside her bedroom door late at night, just standing there. Others close to Haley described her as uneasy around him, often trying to avoid being left alone in the house. And though Billy claimed Haley and Sean were more like friends, those who knew the girl best said otherwise. Still, there was no arrest. Early in the investigation, both Billie Jean Dunn and Sean Adkins were asked to account for their whereabouts and daily routines. Detectives examined bank statements, cell phone records, and work logs. Almost immediately, Sean's story began to unravel. He initially told authorities that on the morning of December 27th, he had gone to work at a Snyder manufacturing plant, only to be fired. According to his version of events, he clocked in around 6 a.m., picked up a drink, and then left after being let go, turning in his uniform on the spot. To investigators, this detail seemed important. It could provide a window into his timeline, but as they dug further, they realized Sean's account was far from accurate. When detectives spoke with Sean's supervisor, they were told something very different. Sean had not been fired. Rather, he quit voluntarily. The supervisor confirmed he had indeed shown up at 6 a.m., but chose to walk away from the job on his own, handing over his uniform before leaving. This distinction mattered because it exposed an early lie in Sean's story. Later, when questioned about this, Sean admitted he had lied to avoid conflict with Billie Jean. He claimed he did not want her to know that he had walked out of a steady job, so he fabricated the firing story. But for investigators, this was the first of many red flags. The cell phone data painted an even murkier picture. Sean told detectives that after leaving work, he drove straight to his mother's home in Big Spring, about 50 miles away, to use her computer to file for unemployment benefits. But the digital trail told a different story. Between 6:35 and 6:56 a.m., his cell phone pinged towers in Colorado City, the very town where Haley lived, miles away from Big Spring. If he had truly gone straight to his mother's house, his phone would have pinged towers along the route. Instead, it appeared as though he had remained close to Colorado City during a critical window of time when Haley was last seen alive. The records did eventually place him in Big Spring, but not until hours later, between 9:38 a.m. and 2:40 p.m. That left nearly a 3-hour gap unaccounted for, a gap that investigators could not ignore. When pressed, Sean continued to insist that he had gone directly to his mother's house, even though the digital evidence contradicted him. These contradictions only fueled suspicion that he may have been in Colorado City longer than he wanted anyone to know. Later that day, Haley's older brother, David, returned home around 4:00 p.m. Finding the front door locked, he entered through a window and froze when he saw Sean standing in the hallway with an alarmed expression, like a deer in headlights, as he described it. Haley's uncle later recalled Sean being asked how anyone could harm an innocent child. Sean chillingly replied, "It's like killing a deer." That evening, bank records revealed more contradictions. After Sean had picked up Billie from work at around 6 p.m., the couple made 2 ATM withdrawals totaling $140. Billie later told police the money was for groceries and gas. Investigators, however, determined the cash was actually spent on narcotics. This raised further concerns for detectives. Drugs might have been used in the household with children present. And when both Billie and Sean were asked to take polygraph tests, they failed. Billie admitted she was on anti-anxiety medication. Sean walked out twice. On the third try, he answered just 2 questions. When asked where Haley might be, he answered Scurry County. When asked who police should look at, he said, "Both of us." Investigators flagged both responses as truthful, but Sean refused to explain further and walked out again. On top of that, a deeper dive into the household revealed something more disturbing than many expected. Detectives searching the property uncovered stacks of printed articles, hundreds of them, covering topics like serial killers, sexual sadism, and intrafamilial violence. It was not just casual browsing. These were carefully saved, printed, and stored, as though someone had been collecting them deliberately. When Billie was confronted with this discovery, she brushed it off, claiming that she and Sean were simply fans of true crime stories, saying, "Plenty of people are into true crime." But to detectives, this explanation felt inadequate. True crime fandom was one thing, but the sheer scale and subject matter of these materials hinted at something much darker simmering beneath the surface. By January 12, 2011, barely 2 weeks after Haley had been reported missing, law enforcement publicly declared that Sean Adkins was officially a person of interest. For many in the town, this came as little surprise. Still, Sean denied any involvement, insisting he had nothing to hide. Then, the situation took an even darker turn. On February 24th, Child Protective Services intervened. Haley's older brother, David, was removed from the home. This was not a random decision. It was a reflection of the growing concerns investigators had about the environment surrounding the household. For a family already torn apart by the disappearance of one child, having another child taken into protective custody was a sign that authorities saw deep and troubling red flags. CPS rarely steps into a situation without strong cause, and here the cause was rooted in the dangers surrounding both Billy and Sean. What investigators uncovered next would be one of the most damning discoveries in the entire case. During the digital forensic analysis of electronics tied to both households, law enforcement found over 100,000 illegal images of minors, what experts classify as child abuse material, or CSAM. The sheer volume was staggering. This wasn't a matter of 1 or 2 questionable downloads or suspicious files. It was an archive of exploitation spread across multiple devices. Some of the images were located on a memory stick inside Billy's home. Others were recovered from a computer at Sean's mother's house. And among the evidence seized was a laptop that seemed central to the investigation. But what happened next only deepened the mystery. Not long after police confiscated the laptop, Sean's stepfather stormed into police headquarters, demanding that the laptop be returned. In a shocking twist, the laptop was eventually given back to Sean. Even now, many people look back at this moment as a massive investigative misstep. Why was such a critical piece of potential evidence returned to a prime suspect? This question haunts both the Dunn family and those who followed the case closely. No arrests were made at that time in connection with the illegal images. Instead, the evidence was presented before a grand jury. Prosecutors later explained that with multiple people having access to the devices, Billy, Sean, his family members, it was impossible to tie the images to one single individual with the level of certainty needed for charges. But for many in Colorado City, this explanation felt hollow. Meanwhile, Billy's own actions only seemed to deepen suspicion. Billy had repeatedly lied to investigators about Sean's whereabouts, protecting him even when inconsistencies piled up. That decision eventually caught up with her. In March, she was arrested, not for Haley's disappearance, but for lying to law enforcement during a time when every hour mattered. It was a betrayal that left the community stunned. Instead of severing ties with the man most often linked to her daughter's case, Billy doubled down. By June, she received probation and, shockingly, chose to move with Sean to Travis County, continuing their relationship as if nothing had happened. They remained together until 2012. And during all that time, there was still no trace of Haley. Her family was left clinging to hope, watching the days stretch into months and the months into years. For Clint Dunn, her father, it was an agonizing existence, an endless search without a destination. But in March of 2013, nearly 2.5 years after Haley disappeared, everything changed. A hiker walking near Lake J.B. Thomas in Scurry County stumbled across something unsettling. Hidden in the brush, scattered and weathered by time, were human remains. The location was haunting in itself, just 20 miles from where Haley had last been seen. Search teams swarmed the area, and investigators carefully collected what little was left. The body had been exposed to the elements for so long that decomposition was extreme. Identification wouldn't come quickly. For weeks, forensic experts worked to confirm what everyone feared. Then, on April 26, 2013, authorities announced the devastating truth. The remains were indeed those of 13-year-old Haley Darlene Dunn.
2013, local authorities were notified of human remains located near Lake J.B. Thomas in southwest Scurry County. The remains were sent to the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification for DNA analysis. On April 26, 2013, the Scurry County District Attorney's Office received written confirmation that the remains have been positively identified as those of Haley Dunn.
For her family, the news landed like a thunderclap. The hope that she might somehow be found alive was gone. Her father, Clint, was quietly told that she had likely died from blunt force trauma. But for reasons that were never fully explained, the public was never given an official cause of death. Authorities remained tight-lipped, withholding details that might have offered some clarity. And so, while the mystery of Haley's whereabouts had finally ended, the mystery of her death had only deepened. The years that followed were filled with silence. From 2013 through 2017, the case sat largely stagnant. There were no arrests, no new suspects, no major announcements. Just the lingering ache of an unresolved crime. It wasn't until 4 years later, in 2017, that Haley's family was able to bury her remains. Even then, closure felt impossible. However, Clint Dunn did not stop. Instead, he became a force of persistence. He organized vigils in her memory, keeping her name alive in the community. He took to social media, building awareness, sharing updates, demanding answers. He rallied anyone who would listen, urging law enforcement and the public not to give up. His grief was heavy, but he transformed it into something sharper: determination. That determination finally paid off in 2019. Out of nowhere, one of Clint's online posts reached someone unexpected. A former middle school student who had been just a child back in 2011 when Haley first went missing remembered finding unusual items in the months after her disappearance. At the time, the student hadn't known their significance. But now, looking back, they realized the items had belonged to Haley. This revelation stunned investigators and the family alike. The most disturbing detail wasn't just that these items had gone unnoticed, it was where they had been found. According to the witness, the belongings had been located in an area that had already been searched multiple times by law enforcement during the initial investigation. How could something so critical have been missed? Had the items been overlooked due to carelessness, or had they been planted there later? For Clint, the discovery was both a breakthrough and a torment. If these items had been seen earlier, if they had been collected in real time, maybe the case wouldn't have dragged on for nearly a decade. Maybe justice would have come sooner. Still, the discovery breathed new life into the investigation. For the first time in years, the door that had been sealed shut creaked open again. As hope flickered back to life, another thread began to unravel. Across West Texas, women were coming forward with disturbing stories of being harassed online by a man who called himself Casey, the same as Sean Adkins's middle name. The harassment wasn't casual. It was graphic, vulgar, and threatening. Private investigator Erica Morse took these reports seriously. She dug into the digital trail, collected the evidence, and linked the activity back to Sean. To her, it was a clear sign of who he really was, a man capable of violence, manipulation, and cruelty. But when she presented her findings to law enforcement, she was met with disbelief. Instead of acting on the evidence, authorities dismissed it outright. Worse, the victims and Erica herself were accused of fabricating the claims. It was a crushing blow, another instance where the system seemed to stall, even when red flags were waving in plain sight. By 2021, momentum was finally building. The whispers about Sean Adkins, the inconsistencies in his alibi, the disturbing online behavior under the name Casey, it was all coming to a head. That spring, behind the scenes, meetings were happening. Investigators from the Texas Rangers and prosecutors from the Mitchell County District Attorney's Office began re-examining the case in earnest. Private investigator Erica Morse, who had been working side by side with Clint since Haley's body was discovered, met with officials and laid out the evidence she had painstakingly gathered. The stories from the women who had been harassed online by Casey. The contradictions in Sean's timeline. The suspicious discoveries that seemed impossible to explain. This time, the message from law enforcement was clear. They were done waiting. An arrest was imminent. And in June of 2021, the breakthrough finally came. On the 14th of that month, in the small city of Big Spring, Texas, Sean Adkins was arrested and charged with the murder of 13-year-old Haley Dunn. The news spread like wildfire across Texas and beyond. For years, his name had been the only one tied publicly to the case. Now, after nearly a decade, he was finally in handcuffs. The images were powerful. Sean led away in chains, flanked by officers, his face hardened but expressionless. He was booked into the Mitchell County Jail, his bond set at $2 million. For Clint Dunn, it was a bittersweet moment. On one hand, the man he had long believed responsible for his daughter's death was finally behind bars. On the other, Clint knew all too well that an arrest did not mean justice. Not yet. The community of Colorado City erupted with cautious relief. After so many vigils, so many years of silence, there was finally progress. But immediately, questions began to swirl. What had changed? What piece of evidence had convinced prosecutors, after all this time, to finally act? The answer, at least to the public, remained hidden. Under Texas law, because the case involved a child victim, the affidavit supporting Sean's arrest was sealed. Reporters and the public only saw a single page, a warrant stating that Sean Adkins was being arrested for murder. No details, no timeline, no clear forensic evidence tying him to the crime. Nothing that explained why, after 10 years, prosecutors felt confident enough to move. Inside the courtroom, Sean said little. He did not enter a plea. He waived his arraignment, leaving the legal process to crawl forward through motions and hearings. Outside those walls, Clint Dunn called it a breakthrough. "There are no words to define how I feel," he said. "We will let the child speak the truth." His voice, once ignored, now carried the weight of vindication. He thanked the community, the investigators who had stayed with him, and every volunteer who had searched for Haley when hope seemed lost. But even as Clint celebrated, a shadow loomed. Prosecutors quietly admitted they were still missing key forensic evidence directly connecting Sean to the crime. They had circumstantial evidence, suspicious behavior, and contradictions in his story, but the direct link, the kind of evidence that could convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt, was not yet there. 2 years later, in June of 2023, that shadow fell fully over the case. The state filed a motion to dismiss the charges against Sean Adkins without prejudice, meaning they could be refiled in the future if stronger evidence was found. District Attorney Ricky Thompson, who had authorized the arrest, requested more time for investigators to build a solid case. And just like that, after spending 2 years in custody, Sean Adkins walked free. For Clint Dunn, it was another gut punch, a reminder that even after an arrest, even after national headlines, justice was not guaranteed. Still, he refused to back down. If anything, the setback made him louder, more determined. He took his fight public once again, this time openly accusing both Sean and Billie Jean Dunn of being involved in Haley's death. "They're both involved," he said in interviews. "That's not even up for discussion anymore." Billie, for her part, distanced herself from Sean by then. Their relationship had collapsed back in 2012, weighed down by suspicion, failed polygraph tests, and the disturbing evidence investigators had found in their home. Evidence like serial killer literature and child pornography stored on computers. None of it had ever led to criminal charges, but the discoveries cast a long, chilling shadow over their lives. Billie claimed she wasn't surprised when Sean was arrested, and she even thanked God that someone was finally being held accountable. But she was never officially named a suspect, and investigators kept their focus squarely on Sean. By early 2025, the Texas Rangers Cold Case Unit formally took over Haley's case. With new technology, fresh resources, and a willingness to review everything from the ground up, the hope was that modern eyes might see what had been missed years before. A Crime Stoppers reward was renewed, offering $3,000 for information leading to a conviction. For the people of Colorado City, this brought a mixture of hope and dread. They had been here before. Arrests, headlines, promises of progress. and they had watched those moments fade into silence. But if we continue covering Haley's case and keep advocating for her, it won't go cold. We'll be here until true justice comes. What are your thoughts on this? Share them in the comments below.